our province that have a social enterprise lens. So I think a few might maybe on here today, so feel free to give yourself a shout out or pipe up if you're here. But the Canadian Hard of Hearing Association, they're a charitable organization which supports individuals with hearing loss through education. They also have awareness and communication programs. Part of their social enterprise is selling hearing assistive equipment and training like lip reading. Also, SABRI, which stands for St. Anthony Basin Resources, Inc., is a social innovation and economic change maker in the Great Northern Peninsula. They operate a suite of social enterprises in the realm of transit, housing, cold storage, and I believe they have a couple more underway. There's also the Growing Our Futures Childcare Co-op based in Port aux Basques. So they're a co-op that provides daycare and childcare services for their members in that area. And then there's Smart Ice. They provide climate change adaptation tools that integrate Indigenous and local knowledge of ice that's relevant to mapping, research, travel, and they also provide employment opportunities for youth. So as you can see, those are four very different organizations that are operating here in the province and also doing great work. And so just want to use that to give a sense of there's a lot of different lenses that this can take. So what is social acquisition? Pretty straightforward. Converting a traditional business that you and I might know into a social purpose organization or a social enterprise. So I also provide a couple examples here of what that can look like. In our province, Sunrise Funeral Cooperative, they were formed from two funeral companies in rural Newfoundland and Labrador that merged to have a community-owned model. So they're a co-op, which is a social purpose organization, an organization that's structured, designed to provide benefits and democratic operation to their members. So that's pretty cool. There's also the Just Like Family Home Care business. They're based in Ontario, and they're a franchise business that was acquired by a coalition of charities. I believe it was 3 charities and a group of individual impact investors to take majority ownership of that organization. That happened in May 2022. And so that's a pretty interesting model and also a pretty interesting path that they followed was specific to financing and expanding a social enterprise. So very interesting what they're doing. And another example is Studio 1313. They are a hair salon that was acquired by a nonprofit community group called Fernwood NRG. Fernwood NRG is a nonprofit based in Victoria. They provide programming and community services for the Fernwood neighborhood. And so they acquired this studio and that economic engine powers their organization and the work that they do. Our friends at Scale Collaborative did a case study about how the acquisition took place. So I have it linked here if folks want to check it out. It's a pretty interesting blueprint. So why now? Why this program? Research shows us that there's 2 big colliding factors in the community sector, which is why we want to, kind of have a program like this. One is what's termed the succession tsunami. So Canada, like a lot of parts of the world, we have an aging population, and a lot of small business owners are looking for an exit. So there's research around this. CFIB did a survey recently that had 55% of Newfoundland and Labrador small business owners that they surveyed will exit within 5 years. That's quite a lot. And 69% of those were citing retirement as the reason. And so if you look around at your communities, I think we can all think about, maybe a coffee shop or a local mom and pop shop that if it went away, it would leave a big hole in the community. So that's one kind of thing that could be potentially looming. Another aspect is the changing financial, kind of aspects of the community sector. So funding, quite frankly, is changing. So organizations may be experiencing less donations. Inflation is something that affects us all, individuals, community organizations, and businesses. Volunteerism is also, in a lot of cases, going down. Volunteers, in some cases, unfortunately, are burning out. And a lot of these organizations, if you've heard the news, things like food banks are a good example of organizations are, being asked and being stretched to do more with less resources, I should say. And so these are two really big factors that, a program like this is what we're aiming to address. So what do we want to accomplish with the SETA program? There's two main things. We want to empower community organizations to become more sustainable and stronger and fund their mission through a business acquisition so they can start generating revenue. We also want to preserve small businesses in rural Newfoundland and Labrador that are looking for an exit and want to help them maintain their business and support their community. So we facilitate kind of this transfer and make sure that these organizations are staying in the community and are doing right by the the mission and the values that those organizations are a part of. So why might this be interesting? Let's talk about the potential benefits and how we support folks. So starting with business owners. One big element of a transition is succession planning. So there are logistical aspects of selling a business or changing ownership, planning that. There is also tax considerations as well. And there's also an emotional piece of if you've spent day in and day out for years, sometimes decades running a business, what does your life look like after that? It's something definitely to think about. And so luckily, there's quite a few resources around succession planning. We're building capacity right now with the SETA program for this with partners, and we're also open to partnerships around this, which I'll also talk about a little bit later. And I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but the legacy. So for entrepreneurs, often their business is a big part of their legacy, and so we don't want that to go away. We want folks that have built great businesses to stay in the communities and operating where they are, and so we don't want to leave holes. Again, exits as well, for entrepreneurs and folks that have started a business or are running a business, that's a lot of blood, sweat and tears that folks are putting into that. And, they deserve an exit as well. And so by facilitating a buyer or a transaction, we can help folks, have a landing pad when they do transition out of their business. A part of that is also, matching folks with potential buyers and service providers, experts that can help with the process, like a normal acquisition as well. For folks that have a business that's on the market and for whatever reason hasn't sold yet, this program is a good opportunity to connect with a category of buyers that you may not have already engaged for your business. So that's a good opportunity for us. And then on the other side of the table, community organizations. One thing I really want to hammer home here is the difference between different types of capital. So earned revenue often is more sustainable than other types of revenue, which can be great. Grants and loans are fantastic for working capital, for financing projects, and things of that nature. But sometimes that grant structure changes, or you don't win it that year, or loans, for whatever reason, maybe you don't qualify for a specific category. And so by having earned revenue through a social enterprise, that can really help you control your destiny as an organization and fund your mission. And also, there's nothing stopping from organizations from spinning up their own social enterprise. This program, we're really focused on acquisition because acquiring an existing business is a way to de-risk elements of running a business. An existing business has a business plan. It has existing customers. Often it has, employees and equipment that go with it. In a lot of ways, it's a turnkey situation where folks can, kind of, pick things up where they left off and have a business that's ready to go. Evidence shows that acquired businesses tend to survive longer than new businesses that are just starting out. And it does make sense just because of the resources and the work that's already been done and the foundation that acquired businesses have. And then I talked about this a bit earlier, but for community organizations, if you acquire an existing business in your community, you're avoiding that business closure. You're, kind of avoiding the impact economically in your community and the potential job loss that could come along with it. And so there's definitely an economic development piece of strengthening our communities by maintaining these businesses to operate. I'll also do an aside here that there is some really great training and resources out there up around, navigating the process of thinking about generating revenue. There's a program called Thriving Nonprofits that is another partnership that we have through the Social Innovation Lab that we can share some great resources on as well. Okay, I'm also going to talk now about co-ops. So the co-op model that I mentioned earlier is a social purpose organization. Converting an existing business to a co-op model is within the scope of the SETA program. So folks don't necessarily have to buy a business, but say, the workers of an organization know that the owner of the business is going to retire, and maybe they want to convert to a co-op and take it over. That's something that we can help with through the SETA program. So I'm going to do a bit of a quick introduction here for folks who may not be familiar, but a co-op is an organization that's member owned. Members who share a common economic, cultural, or social interest. Very important to the structure is that one member has one vote, I should say. So it's a democratic organization. And there's a lot of great benefits that come along with that. One is just the buying power of having members and groups collaborate. There's also local supply chains. Reinforcing that, especially within a rural area, is fantastic for businesses that buy and sell things. And there's also the shared ownership piece. So as businesses expand, particularly something that's structured as a corporation, especially corporations that take external investment, then you may find yourself in a situation where you have a lot of stakeholders that have a lot of interest guiding the business and pulling it away from its original mission. In some cases, a co-op is very focused by nature, by its legal structure, on the interest of the members who govern it. And it is a democratic structure, as I mentioned, with the one member and one vote. There's a lot of models out there. So there's worker co-ops for businesses that produce business services or goods. There's producer co-ops for folks that consume those services and business goods. There's consumer co-ops, community service structured co-ops in the community sector, and also multi-stakeholder co-ops. So there's a lot of different modes and models based on the type of organization. A really important consideration here is this is a good fit for groups of 3 people or more who are buyers, because you need 3 people to set up a co-op. So bringing it all together, thinking about how we help both sides of the table, business owners and community organizations. I see our program of SETA a little bit like a marketplace, matching buyers and sellers, but we're very hands-on to support, organizations. I should note we're fairly focused on the buyer side, but we have a lot of benefits for folks that are, the business owners. And I should also note that my definition here of what a community organization is and who could be a good fit for SETA could include an existing social enterprise if they want to acquire, another business and turn it into a social enterprise. So we're pretty flexible there. I also want to recognize here that we have a very flexible approach. People are different at different stages. So some folks may just want to be dipping their toes and exploring the idea of what generating revenue or acquiring a business could look like to them. Other folks may be much farther along, have a transaction already in mind or in process, and just want to navigate support of that piece and maybe sustain themselves after the acquisition takes place. So we see all sorts, and we're happy to kind of meet at any stage. We meet with everyone through the program one-on-one to see where you're at and try to connect to the right resources if we don't have them, in-house here. And then related to co-ops, want to give a shout out to our partner, the NLFC, the NL Federation of Co-operatives. They do a lot of heavy lifting here, but they're fantastic for supporting people who are spinning up or converting a co-op. As I mentioned, there's a couple different models. They can help folks explore what could be the right model for their co-op, how membership can be structured. There's a bylaw piece as well, incorporation. Really interestingly, co-ops are one of the only incorporation methods I learned recently that involves a business plan alongside incorporation documentation. So that's another piece that they can help you navigate. The NLFC does a lot of education awareness as well. They do a lot of great information sessions. I've attended a few. And so they're a really great partner to have. And of course, there's the network piece as well, 70 active co-ops with them and over 100,000 members. So that shows you the strength of the co-op sector in our province. Okay, so now the good stuff, let's talk about funding. So for folks that are in the SETA program, we provide up to $15,000 for select expenses related to the acquisition. So that includes business valuation. So if you have a professional, service provider that is valuing the business to help, kind of navigate that process and set the price, that's something that we can help cover. Again, there's often legal work associated with a business transaction. So we have a budget for that we can help reimburse expenses. And also if a business plan is created, again, by say a third party professional service provider, that's something that we help with. And then leveraging funds, helping with external financing. I'll talk about that a little bit in a moment. I want to note that these funding pieces are on the buyer side, so on the community organization side. This is a program focused on rural Newfoundland and Labrador. So for organizations that are only active in the metro area, the funding piece, unfortunately today, is not eligible for those organizations, but we will definitely still support a social acquisition. So please just reach out to us if you are only in the metro area. We're still happy to help you. Okay. So I want to talk about partnership because this is also a big part of how the program is run. The Social Innovation Lab, has a mandate to co-create initiatives. So we want to leverage the expertise, the capacity, and the networks of folks in our sector to make sure that we're not competing, we're not duplicating or diminishing our potential impact. This also helps us ensure that we're having, a real impact in terms of, economic and community growth within rural Newfoundland and Labrador. So other nonprofits, agencies, service providers, local development groups, if you would like to partner with us and are interested in what we're doing with this program, please reach out. We're very keen to build a really strong network to support are folks that are going through social acquisition through this program. And so specific to the SETA program, I want to talk about our partners. So North Point Foundation, ACOA, Newfoundland and Labrador government, provincial government, industry, energy, and technology. Thank you so much for helping us fund this program and do the work that we do. Also, CBDC is a fantastic regional partner for us and folks in our network, and of course the NLFC. So next, that was an introduction to the program itself, but we can also now talk about how to get started. So what to think about with an assessment, what to think about when you have, kind of legal aspects of the acquisition, financially, where you need to be heading, and then also how to access different elements of capital. Okay, so I want everyone to think about, if you are interested in social acquisition, where you are today as an organization, or where your business is today, and where do you want to be. So really high level, your business or your organization probably has a mandate or a goal. Hopefully you might not, if you're an informal organization, no worries if you haven't done this, but you may have a strategy that you're following along. So it would be really helpful to think about where an acquisition or where a social enterprise could fit within, the existing strategy of your organization, and also what your readiness is. So there's two ways to think about the readiness piece. One is the actual capacity that you have as an organization for folks to take on, leading an acquisition. The other element is, what the budget could look like. And also, if you've explored kind of your options that are out there. You've seen from this presentation that a social enterprise can take a lot of different forms, and so can an acquisition. It could be, just a straight up purchase of a business, or maybe it's just the assets of a business. Maybe you just need the equipment, or say a building, or maybe you do want to transfer a license that is in operation, or permits to operate, depending on the type of business. So there's a lot of different ways to navigate it. So that's another thing just to think about top of mind, or approach that as you find a business that could be a good fit for your organization. Another piece is the budget. So a lot of us are working on tight budgets. And so it's good to do a bit of soul searching and just understanding of where you're at. This can also determine what purchase price could look like, and also what your financing needs would be, because very often, financing is a component of purchasing a business. So that's another thing that we'll talk about in a moment, but this can also help you level set there. Of course, there's financial and legal documentation. I'll dig into this in a moment, but just be prepared to explore those conversations. Have someone on your team that can be a point of contact, and those things, and be ready to reach out to experts that can help you navigate that process. And of course, I mentioned that our community sector organizations have a lot of different structures as well. So an understanding of where you are with your members, your stakeholders, have you had conversations at a board level? I've linked a couple documents here. So one is a resource navigation document that CSCNL came out with. It has a lot of links to things to think about at each stage. So it's worth a read if you are interested in social acquisition. And also, there's a toolkit that Scale Collaborative has come out with that kind of walks through the process, and it's interactive and has a kind of a works as a fillable workbook. So that's another good toolkit to access as you're going through this process. I don't want to overwhelm, just with all this. So the short answer to all of this is, if you are interested, please just reach out to us, and we can kind of help walk you through it and see where you're at, and maybe what resources or what conversations are next for you. Okay, so let's talk about the legal foundations. This is a huge topic, and we're actually going to host a session just on this a bit later. I should caveat, I'm not a lawyer. This is not legal advice, but what I hope to do today is just give an introduction of the things to expect as you move through social acquisition. So an example of some of the agreements, some, not all, that you can expect to see are things like a letter of intent. So if you're not familiar, a letter of intent is a non-binding agreement between two parties for something like, it could be a business purchase, or it could be a partnership, or it could be a customer relationship. They're pretty flexible and customizable, but as the name states, it is signifying intent to kind of pursue a path. After that, there's also non-disclosure agreements. These are standard legal agreements that protect parties from the sharing of private information. So as you go through a transaction and build a relationship, maybe you crack open, your books for folks to take a look at. These type of documents just ensure that everyone is kind of on the same playing field, and isn't going to be a bad actor and kind of share information that could be damaging if it's released. So this is something that is pretty standard for this process, and we can help folks navigate. Incorporation documents, I touched on this earlier, but this can take a few kind of forms. So it depends on the style of the business. So there's sole proprietorships, there's partnerships, there's corporations, there's co-ops. These all need to be registered, and there's typically fees involved, although the process itself is usually straightforward. But if you're spinning up a new entity, you can expect to be incorporating or kind of registering. And then moving into the actual transaction. So sales documentation, just like incorporation, this can take a couple forms as well. It could be just buying a couple assets and appraising those. It could be buying a whole suite of a business and having a contract around that, or it could be acquiring share capital. So actually transferring ownership shares of a business to a nonprofit. So there's a couple ways that can be structured. And then if you are an organization that has a board, you can definitely expect to have board consents and board approvals for certain budget items, for big decisions that affect the structure of your community organization. My advice is to have conversations at the board level, sooner rather than later in the process as you're exploring this topic or thinking about it, so that you can get everyone on board and also move through that process kind of swiftly if you can. So as I mentioned, every experience is different. No one acquisition is probably going to look the same. So please engage a lawyer when it comes to legal agreements and this piece. We can help with that piece as well if you are looking for partners, but that's one thing that I'll strongly encourage everybody. And so let's talk about the financial piece. Again, another huge topic. This will have its own information session that we'll host in March, but want to give folks kind of an expectation and just a really brief introduction to what to expect on this. So have a budget. Have an understanding, if you're a community organization, of what your purchase budget could look like, where you are financially, what your working capital could look like. And this will also help determine your financing needs as well. If you are a business owner, having an understanding of your price, this can be informed by things like the valuation, the appraisal, and the inspection. As I mentioned, there are professional services providers that do inspections like this, just like a home inspection, if you were to buy a home. So often these things are involved with a business sale as well. And so, as I mentioned, this is something that the SETA program helps with. And so a projections document is extremely helpful. This is linked to the business plan, but an understanding of where the business is at today, and then what it could look like, what historical performance has been like, historical revenue, costs, is rent going up? Have your unit costs or your suppliers increased their prices? So maybe you might need to increase your prices if you're selling a physical item. There's a lot of things to consider. And also our team can help, navigate this process and reviewing statements and helping, come up with a review of these that make sure the numbers match. A big part of financial statements is that they tell a story. And so hopefully your story can tell you that the business that you want to acquire will be feasible. It will be a going concern. And so that's one thing that's really important at this space. So a couple templates that can help you. An income statement for any business is a record of the revenue and expenses of a business that are kind of being tracked. A balance sheet is a record of the assets and liabilities of a business. So things like your debt, your cash on hand, the value of your equipment or your buildings, those are things that will show up on a balance sheet. The plan is very important for a business plan, especially if the business is taking a new direction. I would say don't skimp on this. They can be short or they can be lengthy. This is often something that funders will want to see. So spend some time on it as well. There's a lot of free resources around this. We are a great resource to leverage if you're building a business plan and for your social enterprise and want another second set of eyes on it. And the business plan should also be informed by the financial realities of these, that are in these statements. And then the last one that I didn't touch on, the cash flow statement, this is a record of cash flowing in and out of the business. I like to think about it as kind of tying the other statements together to show what the reality of the business financial health is. There's a couple templates that I have linked here. Feel free to check them out. But these things can be customized to your business as well, or the plan that you have. And so projections are very welcome here. For business owners that are looking to sell, if you have up-to-date financial statements, you'll be ahead of the curve. It can definitely add time to the process. If you're thinking about selling, you then meet a buyer, and then your books aren't up to date, and maybe you want to get a bookkeeper or an accountant to kind of update things. So that'll just add time to the process. So if you already have those things updated, it'll really start you off on the right foot. Another element to think about is that selling a business is a taxable event. So definitely you want to engage a tax professional if you can. In Newfoundland and Labrador, business owners that sell a business to their own employees may be eligible for capital gains exemptions. So that's something to explore as well, because that's can be a significant cost when you do have a business exit. And then just to recap, each organization is different. You may have one piece lock solid, and you may have another one that you don't need as much. But we're happy to be your resource just to help explore this. Okay, so access to capital. Again, the good stuff. So what I mean here is external capital. So this is outside of folks that are in the SETA program and have access to the $15,000 of costs kind of reimbursements. This is for external funding. And big caveat here that external funding is not a guarantee. It's often conditional, and different businesses will have different eligibility for types of funding. But within the program, we want to be your advocate and work with each team to connect them to potential funding sources. It may be something as simple as your team doesn't have bandwidth to look at what's out there, and so we can make connections with partners, or just refer you, hey, check out this is a great opportunity, you should apply for this, something like that. So for community organizations, funding is stackable. So what I mean by that is that you can leverage funds from multiple sources. So maybe you can get a grant for $5,000 here, a loan for $10,000 there. Those on themselves, those are alone modest sums. But if you can access multiple sources of capital, then you can pull resources together, and that can be a really powerful tool for financing a project or something like an acquisition. So for things like grants, or are sometimes called non-dilutive funding, there's a lot of sources. These could be private organizations, they could be government as well. These often have timelines, so these are rolling, or they can be hard deadlines. It really depends on the grant organization. There's often applications, and sometimes there's an interview process. If you know of a funding organization that is applicable to you, I encourage you to sign up for their newsletters. If they have events, attend those. Do what you can to absorb that information and make sure that you're in the know. Federal programs as well that disperse money, they often have a set amount of money, that and they disperse that by a given date. So if you're interested in a program, check that they are still funding organizations, and maybe they haven't passed a deadline or things like that. I'll talk a bit more about some different types of funders now. I think a couple are on the call, so if you are here, I'll invite you to correct me or to drop information in the chat on what you offer, and if folks can get involved. But there's loans from things like WEOC. They offer, I think, up to 50K loans for women entrepreneurs. There's also ACOA. I mentioned before, great support in Atlantic Canada. They have repayable and non-repayable funding. CBDCs in Newfoundland and Labrador, a really great regional partner. They have loans up to 150K, I believe. Of course, there's conditions for all of these. The provincial government, the Department of Industry, Energy, and Technology, they have a couple programs. One is the Business Growth Program. They provide project matching funding up to 100K. These are specific regional projects as well, but they're a business acquisition could, if there's expansion, kind of elements to it, could be relevant for this. And they also have a capacity building fund that provides funding for 5K for strategic planning, which, if your organization is in the very early stages of considering a social acquisition, could be a good fit. There's also a lot of loan opportunities out there. The Community Forward Fund, that's a national program. They provide funding up to 1.2 million for fixed interests. They have an application fee, so call them before you apply. They also have co-op specific funding for up to 100K. So a lot of resources there. There's UNUWEG. They provide loans up to 750K for Indigenous entrepreneurs and communities that have social enterprises. And then federal growth program from the government. I won't list them in kind of infinitum, but they can have specific programs that involve a reimbursement of eligible expenses, things like salaries that typically are a heavy line item for businesses, or research and development, things of that nature. Futurepreneur is another organization great for nascent companies. They do loans up to 75K. They also provide a lot of mentorship. And then there's granting organizations. The Community Foundation of Newfoundland and Labrador. They're just one that comes to mind. And then, of course, credit unions, very active in this province. They provide loans. Folks like the AECU, they donate to community organizations. So definitely a strong partnership to reach out to there. Banks are another option. I have seen for a lot, these are typically a last resort. Sometimes they have less favorable terms or more hoops to jump through, but they are still a funding organization that's out there. And so thinking about post-acquisition, as folks expand their social enterprise, we have a growing sector in Canada for social finance. So these are private or public funds that specifically have a mandate to invest in community organizations or social enterprises. And this can take a lot of forms. This could be debt or equity investment. So debt, think of typical loan products, but equity, when folks take share capital and, actually take an ownership interest in a business. And so there's a bunch of different funding organizations here. Really excitingly, CSCNL has our Caribou Fund in development. So our goal with this is a place-based social finance fund that will support community organizations in Newfoundland and Labrador with a combination of debt, equity, and other types of funding. So stay tuned for announcements on that. It's in the works. This has not been a exhaustive list, but hopefully you can get a sense of the capital, that's out there and that you can access. So let's talk a bit about the program to date. So we've been operating for over a year now. We have 13 buyers and 10 sellers that are ready to be matched. This is I would say that like the tightest cohort, but we're in process with many more than this. But we're kind of well underway. We have one organization that's in negotiation and kind of in the financing stage in the Western region. They've also, had a business valuation and have gone through that process. We have a worker co-op conversion that's kind of in the signing and legal stage. They're very close as well. In Eastern, we're very excited about them. And then we have one acquisition complete in Central. They are also kind of in the paperwork stage and pending relaunch. So a lot of great things coming down the pipe. Please follow us for some exciting updates that I anticipate we'll have by March. And also, if you are interested in this program, know that you're not alone, that we have a strong cohort of folks that are ready to take on social acquisition and get involved. So that was the bulk of the presentation. I hope this has been helpful. As I mentioned earlier, we'll link some resources in this presentation that we made available, this recording as well. Please, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me, but I think we'll have some time for questions shortly. Before we do that, I just want to give a big plug. So to get involved with the program, you can email me, Andre at cscnl.ca, or you can check out these expressions of interest that we have. These forms only take, I would say, about 5 minutes or less to fill out. If there's too much friction, just reach out, or if you get stuck somewhere. If you're a team that is interested in a co-op conversion, you can fill out the buyer form. So that's something that we've included. All the relevant information and questions are within that form. I also want to do a bit of a plug. This session today has been the first in a series. So we have another couple sessions coming up about this program. So on the 6th, we'll be doing an in-person session in Corner Brook for business owners, community organizations, and co-op conversions, folks that are interested in that. These will be open-ended and there also will be a virtual element as well. On the 13th, we have a crossover with our community of practice program. So we'll provide insights into a social acquisition. Really excited to feature the actual process of someone that's gone through that in the province recently. And then on the 20th, we have a session in St. John's on the deep dive on financial and legal aspects. So for folks that are kind of getting into the weeds, that'll be a really powerful resource and an opportunity just to get your question answered there. So please sign up. We'll do a lot of promotion. See us on social and an email after the fact in our newsletter. There's lots of ways to get involved. So with that, I will leave this up, and I think I went a bit faster than I anticipated. So if there's any questions, happy to stick around and take those.